the walls inside that medical jail cell were cinder blocks, and I just looked around. Um, it was so nasty. And I know throughout this whole story, you've heard me say it's so nasty, it's so horrible, it's so disgusting. I don't even like know of another word that I could use. But anyway, you could tell it had several coats of different paint, and the last coat was a dark gray, and underneath the gray was like a dark green color, and you could just tell because of the carvings that was done on the paint. And separating my cot from the toilet sink combo was a small little 4-foot cinder block wall. I could not believe how nasty this jail was. I mean, it looked like human feces smeared on the wall. And I mean, I'm sure it was. Like, what else would it be? And you could just tell it's never cleaned. It made the jail in California look like the fucking Hilton. I eventually dozed off after getting warm enough under those blankets, and you know, you never could fully get sleep being incarcerated. You hear the slamming heavy doors, the talking of the inmates that were in cells next to me. And I got my tablet out, and I eventually heard from my friend. And, you know, she said that everybody had been worried about me, and that she had let my dad know that I had made it and that I needed his email so that we could communicate. I laid there some more, just looking at the walls and all the carvings. And one of the things that I noticed that I was able to connect was there was this boat, and it was like, had a big fishing line, you know, coming from the boat, and it was connected to this big fish. And I don't know how they were able to carve on these walls without some kind of sharp objects, because everything that I had in there was plastic. But, you know, now that I look at this, now that I look at my manuscript and what I've written, that carving was, you know, just another synchronicity of Jonah and the big fish's belly. Anyway, so I looked up. I saw somebody unlocking my cell door. It was a woman dressed in street clothes and an officer behind her. She came in the cell and she hugged me so tight that I began to release all that pent-up emotions from that traumatic transport. She said, "It's me." She said, "It's Donna." She said, "I'm one of your, you know, friends." And she said she wanted me to come check on you. She said, "Just pretend you know me." And so I just finally began to feel safe. And she noticed I could not stop crying. And she said, "Did something happen to you on that transport that brought you back, you know, to Georgia?" And I said, I'm scared. And she said, "Just hold on." And she said, "We're going to get an officer in here to take a report." You know, she said, "Were you touched?" And, you know, I hate that, because it's almost like if you're not touched or physically raped, that the things that happen to you emotionally and mentally aren't just as significant. But regardless, you know, I wasn't sure if I could trust another officer to take a report from me, you know, stating about all the sexual misconduct and harassment that had happened on that van. But I had to do something. You know, I was dealing with an enormous amount of stress and anxiety and panic. I checked the tablet again, hoping for an email, and it seemed a lot of time passed by before a female opened my door and motioned for me to follow her down the hall. She handed me an N95 mask and told me to put it on. You know, everyone there was just terrified of COVID because of, you know, what all was going on in our country, and that I had traveled from California and through, you know, 28 different states to get there. We entered a room, and she had me sit across from her at the table. She had a white legal pad and a pen in front of her. And she said, okay, tell me from the beginning what happened. And I just started to cry. And it was really hard to talk through that mask. She said, it's okay. She said, go ahead and take the mask down. And as I began to tell the story to her, another male officer walked by that door, chastising her about allowing me to be in a room with her, no mask. And she just motioned to him, it was okay. I mean, I was having no symptoms. I was finally able to tell the story about my 8-day transport, and she took notes. And I would stop and pause, and she'd ask, is that all? And she's, I said, do you think that was appropriate behavior? She said, no. She said, it was definitely uncalled for. She said, I'm going to let you take a piece of paper and a pencil to your cell. She said, if you can remember anything else, let me know. So it was completely illegal for me to have a pen, a pencil, paper, a book. You could absolutely have fucking nothing to do in that medical cell. I mean, nothing. Except stare at the walls and your thoughts, and then hope that somebody was going to put money on your book so you could communicate through email on that tablet. I still didn't really feel 100% heard or cared about. And I wanted to walk so slow back to that cell because I knew it would be a long 2 days in there before I was able to meet with the judge on Monday morning. That night, because I was on my period, I kind of made a mess. I didn't have like normal panties on, and it just felt disgusting laying there. And I know this may be too much for a lot of men that are listening to this, and I mean, I apologize if it's offended you, but this is this is women and their bodies and what we go through. And anyway, so I went over to the door and I knocked as hard as I could so I could get somebody on that medical staff to see me. And unfortunately, it was another officer that walked to the door. She said, what is it? I said, listen, I said, I'm on my period. I said, I bled through my underwear. I said, it's on these pants. I said, can I please get a clean pair of pants? And I said, and some kind of underwear, and feminine products. And she said, we don't have anything like that. She said, you'll have to wash out the underwear you have in the sink and then just lay them on something and let them dry. And I said, well, what am I supposed to do while they're drying? She said, I don't know, just sit there on the pad. Yeah, again, here we go. I'm dealing with this over and over there. And I'm just like, fuck this heartless bitch for not having 1 ounce of empathy. And no one cares. No one has compassion. I mean, you run across maybe 5% of the people working in there that somewhat care. Other than that, no, this is the treatment that you're going to get. These are the stories I continue to hear. When I open up and tell my stories, I've had comments and messages about what people are afraid to even talk about happened to them while they were incarcerated. So I stood there not knowing what to do next. And so she explained it to some of the medical staff, and the nurse told her I could have a pair of pregnancy panties. I didn't even know what that was. The officer slid some panties through a slot. They were just wrapped in a little baggie. And I took them out, and I wore those while I washed my underwear out. And then I laid them on that nasty ass brick wall that separated my cot from the toilet. I took a bag of pads out of the container on the floor that the officer had thrown at me the day before. And I was able to, use that. All this mistreatment, the abuse, the anticipation of, when I was going to get out just had exhausted me. I mean, I just stayed in fight for hours until I crashed and dozed off. And that's how my weekend played out. On Sunday evening, I finally received an email from my dad. And he said, I'll be waiting to bond you out first thing in the morning. And Monday morning came around. I saw no activity that the cell or the medical area had announced a court hearing or were lining people up. I paced the floors. I felt butterflies in my stomach, and I thought about being denied bond again. And I walked over the door. I lifted up the slot, and I placed my mouth in that little space, and I yelled, "Nurse, nurse." It took several minutes before she came to my door. She had a scowl on her face, and she looked like she was pissed. She said, "What do you need?" I said, "I'm supposed to see the judge this morning about my bond." She said, "Well, everybody's already left for court." She said, "I guess you're not going." And there I was so just hypersensitive. And I was just ready to break down and start screaming. And she was wearing a cross around her neck. And she walked off and left me standing there looking through the glass. I was back to my cot and into my thoughts. And I said, "God," I said, "that nurse seems like she's having a hard day." I said, "I pray that you will touch her heart and help give her peace." She's wearing a cross. Obviously she believes that there's a Jesus and there's a God. And I just took that time to pray for her, and that was very hard. I mean, you want to talk about praying for somebody that's mistreating you. It was hard to do, but I knew that I was at her mercy. She was going to be my nurse, and I was going to be back there with her. So again, I dozed back off after that, and woke up, and I heard the sound of a key opening up the steel door. And it was an old friend of mine's husband, and Tommy, and he was telling me to follow him. And I said, "Tommy," I said, "please pray for me." I said, "I've got to get out of here." He said, "I already have, girl." He said, "Don't you worry about that." And we walked through the medical area, past the staff, and down a hall, and then through a metal detector and into a room that was set up with a screen. So it was like a virtual meeting with this judge. And there was some deputies standing around me, and the screen came on. The judge was sitting there, and he was going through paperwork, and he just started, asking me questions. And he said, "Why you're here?" He started reading off my charges, which was, so my charges were identity fraud, credit card transaction fraud, exploitation of the elderly, theft by taking, and theft by conversion. I mean, it was a lot of serious charges. And I didn't know the seriousness of it when I was standing there. The only thing that I knew when I was out in California was that I had a fraud warrant. And then on top of this, I had a felon fugitive charge, and I was considered a flight risk. Again, makes no sense, right? I didn't have a warrant when I left the country. It was placed on me while I was down there when I crossed over the border. I was detained. So he read through the charges, and he asked me who that person was. I said, "Well, sir, it was my grandmother." And I said, I had permission to do everything that I did for her. And he said, "Well, you cost Florida County a lot of money to get you back here." He had no idea. They cost me my fucking sanity. And it's still messing with my sanity. And he said, "I have been advised by the DA to not let you out of this jail." And you want to talk about a scary empty, hopeless feeling. That's what I stood there with. I didn't have a chance to say anything other than, Your Honor, I left the United States on January the 9th, and that warrant was placed on January 28th. How am I a felon fugitive? And he said, well, the only thing I can tell you is get a good attorney and maybe he can get you a conditional bond and let you out of here. He said, I'm done. And so he signed off. I turned around and I was ready to die. I mean, it was at that point I had been fighting for my life. And there had come that moment where it was like, I'm better off dead. If this is my life, this is where I'm going to have to stay. This is how I'm going to have to be treated fucking day after day. Then let me die. I can't see my loved ones. I can't be in the sun. I can't use the phone. I can't even fucking write or journal. I can't eat. I'm done. And he walked me back through medical. And I was put back in that cell between two steel doors. And it was like, threw me in there and throw away the key. I did not know what was going to happen for this next, this step in my life there.